The massive throne room of the Corvaxian Empire stretched like a golden canyon. Emperor Taemin sat on his crystal throne, his dark eyes burning with anger. The holographic display floating before him showed the same image for the 100th time that day. A figure in a maintenance suit, face hidden by shadows, working on something in what looked like a ship's engine room. "This person," Taemin said, his voice echoing through the hall, "stopped the greatest war in galactic history. In one night, they shut down every weapon on both our fleets and the rebel fleets. Millions of soldiers ready to die, and this ghost made them all powerless." The royal advisors stood in perfect lines, afraid to speak. They had heard this speech many times in the past 3 months. The Emperor's obsession with finding the mysterious engineer had consumed him completely. "Find them," Taemin commanded. "I don't care what it costs. 200 million credits to whoever brings me this ghost engineer, dead or alive." Far below the throne room, in the deep mechanical levels of the Imperial Palace, Do-hyun wiped grease from his hands with an old cloth. The atmospheric processor hummed quietly now, fixed after 2 hours of careful work. The palace staff would never know how close they had come to breathing toxic air. Do-hyun was human, one of only a few hundred in the entire empire. His people were considered primitive by galactic standards. They had barely learned to travel between stars when the empire found them. Most humans in the empire worked as servants, laborers, or soldiers. Very few were allowed to do technical work. But Do-hyun was different. He understood machines in ways that surprised even himself. While other species relied on complex computers and advanced tools, Do-hyun could feel what was wrong with an engine just by listening to it. His hands seemed to know exactly which wire to fix or which part to replace. He kept this talent hidden. The last thing he wanted was attention from the Empire's leaders. Humans who stood out usually disappeared into research facilities or military programs. Do-hyun preferred his quiet life maintaining the palace's hidden systems. "Hey, human!" a voice called from above. Do-hyun looked up to see 2 palace guards walking across the metal walkway. They wore the purple uniforms of the Emperor's personal guard and carried energy weapons that could cut through steel. "The heating in our barracks is broken again," one guard said. "Fix it before tonight, or you'll be sleeping outside with the maintenance droids." Do-hyun nodded silently. The guards continued walking, already talking about something else. As they passed, he heard fragments of their conversation. 200 million credits, one guard was saying. "Can you believe it? For some engineer who messed with our ships. I heard they're checking every engineering academy in the galaxy," the other replied. "The Emperor thinks this ghost engineer must be some kind of genius, probably trained at the best schools." Do-hyun continued working while listening. He knew exactly who they were talking about. 3 months ago, when the border wars had reached their most violent point, he had made a choice that changed everything. The Empire and the Outer Rim rebels had been destroying each other for years. Billions of people lived in fear while their leaders played war games with entire star systems. Do-hyun had watched the news reports, seen the pictures of burned cities and refugee camps. Something inside him had finally broken. Using his access to the palace's communication systems, Do-hyun had spent weeks studying both fleets. He learned their weapons, their defenses, their weak points. Then, during the night before the largest battle in galactic history, he had acted. It took him 6 hours to write the virus. The code was elegant and simple, designed to spread through both fleets' computer networks like water flowing downhill. The virus didn't destroy anything. It simply turned off every weapon system while leaving life support and engines untouched. When the fleets arrived at the battle zone, they found themselves completely defenseless. Admirals on both sides tried everything, but their weapons would not fire. With no choice but to talk or retreat, they chose to talk. The war had ended in a single day. Do-hyun finished adjusting the atmospheric processor and gathered his tools. He felt proud of what he had done, but also worried. The Emperor's search was becoming more desperate every day. Innocent engineers across the galaxy were being questioned, arrested, even kidnapped by both sides, looking for their own ghost engineer. He walked through the narrow maintenance tunnels toward the guard barracks. The palace was like a small city, with thousands of people living and working in its towers and underground levels. Most of them never noticed the human maintenance worker who kept their world running smoothly. The heating system in the guard barracks was indeed broken. Do-hyun found the problem quickly, a failed heat exchanger that should have been replaced months ago. But the palace maintenance budget was always tight, and guard comfort was not a priority for the royal administrators. Do-hyun had learned to be creative with repairs. Instead of replacing the expensive heat exchanger, he rewired the system to use waste heat from the nearby kitchen equipment. It was a simple solution that worked better than the original design. As he worked, more guards entered the barracks. They talked loudly about the Emperor's search, about raids on engineering colleges, about suspect lists growing longer every day. "I heard they're going to start checking the outer colonies next," one guard said. "Maybe offer rewards for information about unusual engineering activity." "The Emperor's getting crazy about this," another replied. "He thinks this ghost engineer is the key to winning future wars. Like having them on our side would make us unbeatable." Do-hyun tested the heating system and smiled as warm air began flowing through the vents. The guards would sleep comfortably tonight, never knowing that the person they were hunting had just fixed their broken heater. He packed his tools and headed back to his small quarters in the service levels. Tomorrow would bring new repairs, new problems to solve. The palace's machines always needed attention, and Do-hyun was happy to provide it. But as he walked through the empty corridors, Do-hyun wondered how long his secret could last. The Emperor's search was growing more intense, more desperate. Sooner or later, someone might start asking the right questions. For now, though, he was just another invisible human servant in a vast imperial palace. The ghost engineer that the Emperor sought with such passion was closer than anyone could imagine, hiding in plain sight among the pipes and processors that kept their world running. Royal Engineer Sang-ho stood before the Emperor's throne, his uniform crisp and his medals shining under the crystal lights. He had been chosen to lead the search for the ghost engineer, and the pressure was crushing him. 2 months had passed since the hunt began, and they had found nothing. "Report!" Emperor Taemin commanded, his voice cold as space. "We have investigated 47 engineering academies across 12 star systems," Sang-ho said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We have questioned over 3,000 engineers, professors, and students. We have analyzed the virus code with our best computer specialists." "And?" the Emperor asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Nothing, Your Majesty. The code is unlike anything we have seen before. It uses techniques that are not taught in any known school. The programmer thinks in ways that our experts cannot understand." Emperor Taemin's fist slammed against his throne's armrest. How can someone this brilliant simply vanish? They must have left traces, connections, something. 5 levels below the throne room, Do-hyun crawled through a narrow access tunnel, following the sound of sparking electricity. The palace's main power grid was acting up again, and if he didn't fix it soon, half the building would lose power. Palace Administrator Ji-woo paced nervously in the main control room, watching warning lights flash on her displays. The backup generators could only handle so much load, and the Emperor had an important meeting with foreign ambassadors in 2 hours. "Where are the royal engineers?" she asked her assistant. "Still investigating engineering schools, Administrator. They left 3 days ago to check the Vega Technical Institute." Ji-woo sighed. The Emperor's obsession with finding the ghost engineer was pulling resources away from basic palace maintenance. She had submitted 6 requests for additional engineering staff, but they had all been denied. The budget was going entirely toward the search. Deep in the power distribution center, Do-hyun found the problem. A main coupling had failed, probably due to age and stress. The palace's electrical system was over 200 years old, and parts failed regularly. But this coupling was special. It was made from rare metals that took weeks to obtain. Do Hyun studied the failed part, then looked around the room. His eyes fell on a backup power relay that wasn't being used. The relay had similar components, but they were arranged differently. Most engineers would order a new coupling and wait for delivery. Do Hyun saw another solution. He spent 3 hours carefully removing parts from the unused relay and rebuilding the failed coupling. His modifications actually made it stronger than the original design. When he finished, the power grid hummed with smooth efficiency. The lights in Ji-woo's control room stopped flashing. Her displays showed green across the board. She stared at the readings in surprise. "When did the Royal Engineers get back?" she asked her assistant. "They're still off-world, Administrator. These readings show the repair was completed an hour ago." Ji-woo frowned. "Who else has access to the main power center?" Her assistant checked the duty roster. "Only maintenance staff, Administrator. But they're not qualified for this kind of repair." "Log it as completed by the day shift engineering team," Ji-woo decided, "and make a note to commend them for quick work." Do Hyun had already left the power center and was heading to his next job. The Emperor's private quarters had been having problems with the environmental controls. The temperature would swing between too hot and too cold, making the Emperor irritable during his daily briefings. The problem was in the climate control computer. Someone had tried to upgrade it recently, but they had made errors in the programming. The system was fighting itself, constantly adjusting and readjusting without finding balance. Do Hyun connected his portable diagnostic tool and studied the code. Within minutes, he found the errors and corrected them. He also added a few improvements that would make the system more efficient and reliable. When Emperor Taemin returned to his quarters that evening, the temperature was perfect. The air was fresh and comfortable. For the first time in weeks, he didn't have to call for maintenance staff to adjust the environmental controls. Meanwhile, Royal Engineer Sang-ho was dealing with his own problems. The investigation at the Vega Technical Institute had been a disaster. 3 students had been arrested on suspicion of being the ghost engineer, but their interrogation revealed they could barely write basic code. The institute's director had filed formal complaints with the Galactic Council. Other schools were starting to refuse cooperation with the investigation. Word was spreading that the Emperor's search was becoming desperate and careless. "Sir," Sang-ho's assistant reported as they traveled back to the capital, "we're getting reports of similar engineering prodigies being kidnapped from their homes. The rebels appear to be conducting their own search." Sang-ho rubbed his tired eyes. "They want their own ghost engineer. This is turning into a galaxy-wide talent hunt. What are your orders, sir? Expand the search. Start checking smaller technical schools, private workshops, even self-taught engineers, and increase security around any promising candidates we find." Back at the palace, Do Hyun was finishing his evening rounds. He had repaired a broken waste recycler, updated the software in 3 maintenance droids, and fixed a leak in the water purification system. It had been a typical day of invisible work that kept the palace running smoothly. As he returned to his quarters, Do Hyun passed a group of off-duty guards watching a news broadcast. The reporter was talking about the increasing violence in the search for the ghost engineer. 12 engineering firms have been raided this week, the reporter said. The Outer Rim rebels are offering 50 million credits for information, while the Empire has raised its reward to 300 million. Do Hyun stopped walking. The reward had increased again. That meant the Emperor was getting more desperate. And desperate rulers made dangerous decisions. One of the guards noticed him standing there. "What are you looking at, human? Get moving." Do Hyun nodded and continued to his quarters, but his mind was racing. The search was spiraling out of control. Innocent people were being hurt because of what he had done. The war might have ended, but his actions were causing a different kind of suffering. In his small room, Do Hyun sat on his simple bed and stared at the metal walls. He had access to the palace's communication systems. He could send a message to both sides, claiming to be the ghost engineer and demanding they stop hurting innocent people. But revealing himself would mean certain death or imprisonment. Worse, it might expose humanity to the Empire's attention, in ways that could be very bad for his species. Do-hyun decided to wait and watch. Maybe the search would lose momentum over time. Maybe both sides would give up and move on to other concerns. He was wrong about that. The next morning brought news that would change everything and push the galaxy toward a crisis that only he could resolve. The emergency meeting in the Emperor's war room began at dawn. Holographic displays showed star maps filled with red warning markers. Admiral Kyung-soo stood at attention, his face grim as he delivered the bad news. "The rebels have launched a massive offensive," he reported. 30 star systems along the border are under attack. But that's not the worst part, Your Majesty. Emperor Taemin leaned forward in his chair. "Explain." "Their ships have been upgraded. New weapons, better shields, faster engines. Our forces are being outmatched completely. In the last week, we've lost 12 major battles." The Emperor's face darkened. The ghost engineer. They found him first. "It appears so, Your Majesty. These upgrades couldn't have come from ordinary rebel technology. Someone with extraordinary skills is helping them." In the rebel stronghold on the planet Krios, Commander Yoonji studied the same battle reports with growing satisfaction. Her forces were winning victories they had only dreamed of months ago. But she knew the truth that her admirals didn't. The ghost engineer wasn't working for them. The technology upgrades had appeared mysteriously on their ships 3 weeks ago. No one knew how they got there. Engineers would arrive for routine maintenance and find their weapon systems completely rebuilt and improved. The modifications were brilliant, elegant, and completely anonymous. Yoonji suspected the ghost engineer was playing both sides, just as they had done during the border wars. Someone out there was trying to balance the conflict, preventing either side from achieving total victory. Deep in the palace maintenance tunnels, Do-hyun was indeed playing both sides. Using his access to Imperial communication networks, he had been quietly transmitting technical specifications to both fleets. Each side received just enough advantages to match the other, ensuring that neither could win decisively. It was delicate work. Do-hyun had to study both sides' technology, understand their strengths and weaknesses, then provide improvements that would keep them balanced. He drew on his knowledge of human engineering principles, which often found simple solutions to complex problems. The rebels got better shield generators based on human magnetic field theory. The Empire got improved engine designs inspired by human combustion technology. Both sides became stronger, but neither gained a lasting advantage. Do-hyun believed this was the only way to prevent another devastating war. If one side became too powerful, they would crush the other completely. The resulting occupation or revenge would cause suffering for millions of people, but his careful balance was becoming harder to maintain. Imperial spy master Wook had noticed the pattern of mysterious upgrades and was investigating aggressively. "The ghost engineer isn't just helping rebels," Wook reported to the Emperor. "Our own ships are receiving similar modifications. Someone is playing a larger game." Emperor Taemin's anger reached new heights. "They're manipulating us, making us dance to their tune like puppets." "Your Majesty," Wook continued, "I recommend extreme measures. We should begin interrogating all civilian engineers in the Empire. Use truth serums, mind probes if necessary." "Do it," the Emperor commanded, "and expand the raids. If engineering schools won't cooperate, arrest their entire faculties." The new orders went out immediately. Across the Empire, security forces began mass arrests of anyone with technical training. Engineering facilities were seized, computers confiscated, research projects shut down. Do-hyun watched the news reports with growing horror. His actions were causing exactly the kind of oppression he had hoped to prevent. Innocent engineers were being dragged from their homes. Universities were being closed. Scientific research was grinding to a halt. On the planet Novara, security forces stormed the prestigious Technical Academy. Professor Dal Su, who had spent 40 years teaching young engineers, was arrested along with his entire staff. His crime was possessing advanced knowledge that might make him the ghost engineer. The Academy's students protested, but they were arrested too. Within hours, one of the galaxy's finest engineering schools became an empty building guarded by Imperial troops. Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. The Empire's technical infrastructure was being destroyed by its own paranoia. Research. Projects that had taken years to develop were abandoned. Engineering students fled to neutral systems to continue their education. Captain Min Ho of the Palace Guard was beginning to notice strange patterns in his security reports. Equipment problems throughout the palace were being resolved with unusual speed and efficiency. Repairs that should have taken days were completed overnight. His investigation led him to the maintenance schedules. The same human worker, Do Hyun, seemed to be present whenever these miraculous repairs occurred. But the idea that a primitive human could be responsible for advanced engineering work seemed impossible. Administrator Ji-woo, Captain Min-ho said, during their weekly security briefing, "I need to ask about your maintenance staff." "What about them?" Ji-woo replied, distracted by reports of failing systems throughout the palace. Specifically, the human worker, Do Hyun. His work assignments coincide with many of our resolved technical problems. Ji-woo pulled up Do Hyun's file on her display. "He's been here for 8 years. Good worker. Never causes trouble. Handles basic maintenance tasks." "What's his technical background?" "Minimal formal training. His species barely had spaceflight when we found them. He learned on the job." Captain Min-ho studied the file, but the connection still seemed unlikely. How could someone with such limited background be involved in advanced engineering? Meanwhile, the Emperor was authorizing increasingly desperate measures. Spy Master Wook had proposed using banned interrogation techniques on captured engineers. Several had died under questioning, but none had proven to be the ghost engineer. "Perhaps we're thinking about this wrong," Dr. So-ra suggested during a council meeting. She was the Empire's leading expert on alien biology and had been studying the ghost engineer's work patterns. "Explain," the Emperor demanded. "All of our assumptions are based on the idea that the ghost engineer must be highly educated, probably from an advanced species. But what if they're not?" The council members looked at her with confusion. Royal Engineer Sang-ho spoke first. "The complexity of their work requires advanced training. No primitive species could achieve such results." "That's exactly my point," Dr. So-ra continued. "We're looking for someone who thinks like us, but the ghost engineer clearly doesn't. Their solutions are elegant but simple. They find shortcuts that our trained minds can't see because we're locked into conventional thinking." "Are you suggesting the ghost engineer is from a primitive species?" the Emperor asked. "It's possible. A species that developed technology through necessity rather than formal education might see problems differently. They might find solutions that escape our notice." The Emperor dismissed the idea with a wave of his hand. "Impossible. Primitive species lack the intelligence for such work." But Dr. So-ra's words planted a seed of doubt. That evening, the Emperor found himself wondering if they had been searching in the wrong places entirely. Do Hyun was working late in the communications center, ostensibly repairing a faulty data relay. In reality, he was preparing for his most ambitious intervention yet. The war was escalating rapidly, and both sides were approaching a point of no return. He had developed a plan that would end the conflict permanently, but it would require revealing his capabilities more openly than ever before. The risk was enormous, but the alternative was watching the galaxy tear itself apart while innocent people suffered. As he worked, Do Hyun could hear guards in the corridor discussing the latest arrests. The Emperor's search was becoming a reign of terror that threatened to destroy the Empire's entire scientific community. Tomorrow, Do Hyun decided, he would implement his final solution. It was time to end this war once and for all, regardless of the personal cost. Dr. Sora stood in her laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing brain scans and genetic analyses. For weeks, she had been studying the psychological profiles of known engineering geniuses, trying to understand how the ghost engineer's mind might work. Computer, display comparative analysis of problem-solving approaches across species, she commanded. The display showed dozens of alien species and their typical methods of approaching technical problems. Most advanced civilizations followed similar patterns: complex theoretical frameworks, extensive computer modeling, team-based research approaches. But one category stood out as different: species that had developed technology under extreme survival. Pressure showed radically different thinking patterns. They favored simple, direct solutions that could be implemented quickly with limited resources. Dr. Sora's assistant, a young scientist named Hoon, entered the laboratory with fresh data. "Doctor, I've finished analyzing the ghost engineers. Code samples. The results are fascinating." "Show me," Dr. Sora said, gesturing to the main display. "The programming style is unlike anything in our databases. It uses basic commands and simple logic structures, but combines them in ways that create incredibly sophisticated results. It's like using a child's building blocks to construct a palace." Dr. Sora studied the analysis carefully. "This supports my theory. An advanced mind working with primitive tools would develop exactly this kind of approach." "Doctor," Hoon said hesitantly, "there's something else. I ran the code through our xenological database, looking for species-specific thinking, patterns, and the closest match is with human cognitive structures. The way problems are broken down, the preference for practical over theoretical solutions, the use of intuitive leaps rather than systematic analysis." Dr. Sora felt her breath catch. "Are you suggesting the ghost engineer is human?" "The correlation is 93%, Doctor. Of course, it could be coincidence, or another species with similar cognitive patterns." But Dr. Sora was already thinking about the implications. Humans were considered one of the most primitive species in the Empire. They had only recently achieved interstellar travel and were generally regarded as useful only for manual labor. "Schedule a meeting with the Emperor," she told Hoon. "I need to present a new theory." Meanwhile, Captain Min-ho was conducting his own investigation. His suspicions about Do-hyun had grown stronger, and he had begun following the human maintenance worker during his shifts. What he observed was remarkable. Do-hyun moved through the palace with complete confidence, understanding its systems better than engineers who had worked there for decades. His repairs were fast, efficient, and often improved upon the original designs. But the most telling moment came when Min-ho watched Do-hyun work on a complex atmospheric processor. The unit had been malfunctioning for weeks, baffling the royal engineers. Do-hyun diagnosed the problem in minutes and fixed it with a solution so elegant that Min-ho barely understood how it worked. "That's impossible," Min-ho whispered to himself. "No human should be able to do that." He began pulling Do-hyun's complete records, going back to when the human had first arrived at the palace. The file was surprisingly thin: basic personal information, work assignments, and performance reviews. Nothing that suggested exceptional abilities. But buried in the maintenance logs, Min-ho found patterns that excited and terrified him. Every major system failure in the palace over the past 3 years had been resolved when Do-hyun was on duty. Problems that should have required teams of engineers were mysteriously solved overnight. In the Emperor's throne room, Dr. Sora was presenting her controversial theory to a skeptical audience. Royal advisors and military commanders listened with barely concealed disbelief. "Your Majesty," she concluded, "all evidence points to the ghost engineer being from a primitive species, most likely human. Their cognitive approach to problem-solving matches the observed patterns exactly." Emperor Taemin's face showed a mixture of anger and confusion. "You're telling me that a species we consider barely intelligent has produced the most dangerous engineer in galactic history? Intelligence and education are not the same thing, Your Majesty. Humans developed their technology through trial and error, learning to solve practical problems with limited resources. This creates a very different kind of engineering mind." "Royal." Engineer Sang-ho stepped forward, his voice filled with indignation. "Doctor, with respect, this theory is absurd. Humans cannot even understand our basic technical manuals. How could one of them create technology that surpasses our best work?" "Because they don't think like us," Dr. Sora replied firmly. "They see solutions we cannot see because our education blinds us to simple approaches." The Emperor stood and began pacing, his mind racing with implications. "If this is true, then we've been searching in completely the wrong places." "Yes, Your Majesty. We should be looking at humans within the Empire, particularly those with access to Imperial technology and communication systems." The meeting was interrupted by Spy Master Wook, who entered with urgent news. "Your Majesty, we've intercepted rebel communications. They're planning a massive offensive against our border worlds. Both fleets are mobilizing for what could be the largest battle in galactic history." Emperor Taemin felt his world spinning out of control. "When?" "Within days, Your Majesty. And there's something else. Both sides are boasting about new technological advantages. The ghost engineer appears to be active again." In the depths of the palace, Do-hyun was indeed preparing for his most ambitious project yet. He had watched the escalating violence with growing concern. The war was approaching a level of destruction that would make his previous interventions seem small. Both fleets were gathering near the Proxima Nebula, a strategic location that would determine control of 12 star systems. Millions of soldiers were preparing for battle, while billions of civilians waited in terror for the outcome. Do-hyun had spent weeks developing a solution that would end the war permanently. It was risky and would require him to expose his capabilities more than ever before, but he saw no alternative. His plan involved simultaneously disabling both fleets' weapons while leaving their life support and communication systems intact. But this time, he would also transmit a message that would force both sides to confront the futility of their conflict. As he worked on the final preparations, Do-hyun heard footsteps in the corridor outside. He quickly closed his access panel and picked up a diagnostic tool, pretending to run routine maintenance checks. Captain Min-ho appeared in the doorway, his expression serious and thoughtful. "Do-hyun," he said quietly, "I need to speak with you." Do-hyun felt his heart racing, but kept his voice calm. "Yes, Captain? Is there a problem with the security systems?" Min-ho studied the human's face carefully. "You could say that. I've been reviewing maintenance records, and I've noticed some interesting patterns." "Patterns, sir?" "Problems that get solved when you're on duty. Complex repairs that happen overnight. System improvements that appear without authorization." Do-hyun continued working, trying to appear casual. "I do my best to keep things running smoothly, Captain. Sometimes problems are simpler than they appear." "That's exactly what concerns me," Min-ho said. "Things that baffle our royal engineers are simple. For you. That doesn't match your supposed training level." The conversation was interrupted by alarm signals throughout the palace. Emergency lights began flashing as the Emperor's voice echoed through the communication system. "All personnel to battle stations. Both fleets are moving toward engagement. Prepare for combat operations." Min-ho looked at Do-hyun with new understanding. "The timing is interesting, don't you think? The ghost engineer always acts when major battles are about to begin." Do-hyun realized his secret was about to be exposed. But with war imminent, he had to choose between protecting himself and saving millions of lives. The choice was easier than he had expected. Ambassador Hae-in stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Concordia, watching both fleets gather in the space around her ship. The Empire's forces approached from the galactic north, hundreds of warships arranged in perfect battle formations. From the south came the rebel fleet, smaller but equipped with the mysterious new technologies that had been appearing on their ships. "This is madness," she said to her aide. "Both sides claim they want peace, but they're preparing for the largest battle in galactic history." "The peace talks are just a cover," her aide replied. "Each side hopes to negotiate from a position of strength after they destroy the other fleet." Neither side knew that the mysterious ghost engineer was about to change everything once again. In the palace's deepest communication center, Do-hyun worked frantically on his most complex creation yet. Captain Minho stood guard at the door, having made a decision that surprised them both. "I don't understand why you're helping me," Do-hyun said as he connected data cables to the main communication array. "Because I've watched you for months," Minho replied. "Every repair you make improves people's lives. Every system you touch works better than before. If you're the ghost engineer, then you're trying to save lives, not destroy them." Do-hyun looked up from his work. "When this is over, the Emperor will execute both of us. Maybe. But if we do nothing, millions of people will die today. That's not a choice I can live with." The virus Do-hyun was creating was unlike anything he had built before. Instead of simply disabling weapons, this one would seize complete control of both fleets' communication systems. Every screen, every display, every speaker would carry the same message simultaneously. But the virus had to be perfect. If either fleet retained any weapons capability, they would use it against the defenseless ships of the other side. Do-hyun had to disable every weapon on over 600 warships at exactly the same moment. "How long until the fleets engage?" Do-hyun asked. Minho checked his communication device. 2 hours. Maybe less if someone gets nervous and fires early." Do-hyun's fingers flew across his control interface, writing code that would snake through the fleet's networks like digital lightning. The virus was elegant in its simplicity. It would identify weapon systems by their energy signatures and shut them down by overloading their safety protocols. Meanwhile, Royal Engineer June was discovering anomalies in the palace's data networks. His equipment showed massive data transfers moving through the communication array, but the traffic didn't match any authorized transmissions. "This is impossible," he muttered, checking his readings again. "Someone is using our communication array to transmit signals across half the galaxy." He called his supervisor, then security, then anyone who would listen. The signals were coming from deep within the palace's restricted areas, but no one was supposed to have access to that equipment. "Sir," June reported to the Palace Security Center, "I'm detecting unauthorized use of the primary communication array. The signals are incredibly sophisticated and are being transmitted to coordinates matching both fleet positions. The security chief was too busy with battle preparations to pay much attention. Just log it and file a report. We'll investigate after the battle." But June was persistent. He traced the signals to their source and was shocked to discover they originated from the maintenance levels. Someone in the palace's own basement was conducting what appeared to be a massive hacking operation. In the Emperor's war room, Spy Master Wook was monitoring communications from both fleets when his screens began flashing with warning signals. "Your Majesty," he called out, "I'm detecting strange network activity throughout our fleet. Someone is attempting to penetrate our ship systems." Emperor Taemin spun around. "The rebels are trying to hack our fleet?" "No, sir. The intrusion signals are coming from here, from the palace itself." The Emperor's face went white with rage and realization. "The ghost engineer. They're here, in my own palace. Security teams are tracing the source now, Your Majesty. We should have the location within minutes." Do-hyun heard the alarm signals echoing through the palace corridors and knew his time was running out. The virus was 90% complete, but he needed at least another hour to finish the message component. "They're coming," Minho warned, listening to security chatter on his communication device. "Multiple teams are heading this way." "I need more time," Do-hyun said, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked. "The fleet disabling will work, but without the message, they'll just repair their weapons and fight later." "What can I do?" Do-hyun pointed to a secondary console. Help me upload the virus components to the fleet networks. I'll walk you through it. For the next 30 minutes, a human maintenance worker and an Imperial Guard captain worked together to prevent the largest battle in galactic history. Minho followed Do-hyun's instructions, learning to manipulate systems he had never understood before. The virus spread through both fleets like a digital plague, invisible to their security systems because it mimicked normal maintenance protocols. Each infected ship would pass the virus to other ships through routine communication, creating an exponential spread that could not be stopped. Royal Engineer June led the security teams through the maintenance tunnels, following the source of the unauthorized transmissions. His equipment pointed directly toward the main communication center, where two figures were working frantically at the control panels. "There!" he shouted, pointing down the corridor. "Two people in the communication center. The security teams surrounded the entrance while June tried to understand what he was seeing. One of the figures was Captain Min-ho, a respected member of the Palace Guard. The other appeared to be a human maintenance worker. "This makes no sense," June muttered. "Why would a guard captain be helping a human hack our communication systems?" The answer came when his equipment detected the completion of the virus upload. Across space, every weapon on both fleets suddenly went silent as their systems shut down simultaneously. In the Emperor's war room, Admiral Kyung-soo stared at his displays in disbelief. "Your Majesty, our entire fleet has lost weapons capability. All ships are reporting complete weapon system failures." "The rebels, too," Spy Master Wook added, monitoring the enemy communications. "They're as helpless as we are." On board the rebel flagship, Commander Yoon-ji was dealing with the same crisis. Her weapons officers frantically tried to restart their systems while her communications staff reported similar failures throughout the rebel fleet. "It's the ghost engineer again," she said grimly. "Just like during the border wars." But this time was different. As both fleets struggled with their disabled weapons, every screen in both fleets suddenly displayed the same image: the face of a young human man speaking directly to them. "My name is Do-hyun," the image said. "I am the engineer you have been searching for. I disabled your weapons 3 months ago to prevent the border wars, and I have done it again today." The message continued as security teams burst into the communication center, where Do-hyun and Minho waited calmly, their work complete. "I am human, a species you consider primitive. But I have watched this war tear apart the galaxy, and I cannot stand by while millions die for the pride of their leaders. Your weapons will remain disabled until you choose to talk instead of fight." Emperor Taemin watched the message in stunned silence, finally understanding that the most wanted person in the galaxy had been living in his own palace for years, invisibly maintaining the systems that kept his world running. The hunt was over, but the real story was just beginning. The throne room had never been so quiet. Emperor Taemin sat staring at the human who had been brought before him in chains. Do-hyun stood calmly, showing no fear despite facing certain execution. Captain Min-ho knelt beside him, also in chains, his military career destroyed by his choice to help. 3 years, the Emperor said slowly. "For 3 years. The person I spent fortunes searching for was fixing my broken heating system." Do-hyun nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." "You made me look like a fool in front of the entire galaxy. That was never my intention, Your Majesty. I only wanted to prevent unnecessary deaths." Emperor Taemin stood and began pacing, his mind struggling to accept what he had learned. The most brilliant engineer in galactic history was a human, a species he had always considered barely intelligent. Dr. Sora stepped forward from the crowd of advisors. "Your Majesty, if I may speak." "What is it, Doctor?" "This proves everything. I theorized about human cognitive abilities. Do-hyun's lack of formal education actually helped him see solutions that our trained minds missed. His species developed technology through necessity, creating a completely different approach to problem-solving." Royal Engineer Sang-ho shook his head in disbelief. "How is this possible?" Our engineering academies train students for decades. How can someone with no formal education surpass our best minds? Do-hyun spoke quietly. Because you learn to think inside boxes, while we learn to think around problems. When your complex solutions fail, we find simple ones that work. Silence, the Emperor commanded, but his anger was mixed with fascination. You destroyed my fleet's weapons. You could have let us win this war. Winning the war would have meant millions of deaths, Your Majesty. The rebels would have fought to the last ship. Victory would have been more costly than defeat. Ambassador Hae-in's voice crackled through the communication system. Your Majesty, I have urgent news from the peace talks. The Emperor activated the main display. Hae-in's image appeared, speaking from the diplomatic vessel between the two disabled fleets. The disabling of both fleets has created an unexpected opportunity, she reported. With no weapons to threaten each other, both sides are actually talking. Real negotiations, not the posturing we've seen before. Emperor Tai-min felt his worldview shifting. What are they discussing? Territorial boundaries, trade agreements, shared resources. Commander Yun-ji has agreed to withdraw from 3 contested systems in exchange for civilian transport rights. It's the most progress we've made in years. The Emperor looked at Do-hyun with new understanding. You forced us to negotiate by making fighting impossible. Yes, Your Majesty. When people cannot hurt each other, they must find other ways to resolve their differences. Spy Master Wook stepped forward with his own report. Your Majesty, I've been analyzing the modifications both fleets received over the past months. The Ghost Engineer, Do-hyun, was providing technological improvements to both sides equally. He was balancing the war, Dr. Sora added, ensuring neither side could achieve total victory. It was a deliberate strategy to minimize casualties. Captain Minho finally spoke. Your Majesty, I watched this man work for months. Every repair he made improved people's lives. He fixed our heating, our power, our water systems. He never asked for recognition or reward. He just wanted to help. The Emperor studied both prisoners carefully. The penalty for treason is death. The penalty for making the Emperor look foolish is also death. Do-hyun met his gaze steadily. I understand, Your Majesty. However, the Emperor continued, the penalty for preventing a catastrophic war should be reward, not punishment. The throne room erupted in surprised murmurs from the assembled advisors and guards. You're pardoning them? Royal Engineer Sang-ho asked in disbelief. I'm doing more than that, Emperor Tae-min said. Do-hyun, you will become my chief innovation advisor. Captain Minho, you will head my new Department of Practical Engineering. Do-hyun looked surprised for the first time since his capture. Your Majesty, I don't understand. You've shown me that our entire approach to technology is flawed. We've become so focused on complexity that we've forgotten the value of simple solutions. I want you to teach our engineers to think like humans. Dr. Sora smiled broadly. Your Majesty, this could revolutionize our entire technological base. Human engineering principles combined with our advanced resources could lead to incredible innovations. Exactly, Doctor. And I want you to establish a new research program studying human cognitive abilities. If one human can achieve this much, imagine what we could learn from studying their entire species. Over the following weeks, news of the human engineer spread throughout the galaxy. The story captured imaginations everywhere. A simple maintenance worker who had outsmarted the greatest military minds in history. Do-hyun's first project as Chief Innovation Advisor was establishing the Multi-Species Engineering Academy. Students from dozens of different species would learn together, sharing their unique perspectives and approaches to problem solving. The key, Do-hyun explained to his first class of students, is not to think like your species expects you to. Think. Look at problems from angles that seem impossible. The best solutions are often the simplest ones. Human students were recruited from across the galaxy to join the academy. Many had been working as servants or laborers, their talents unrecognized by societies that judged them by their species rather than their abilities. Captain Min Ho found his new role equally challenging and rewarding. His Department of Practical Engineering focused on making existing technology more reliable and efficient rather than simply more complex. "We had engineers who could design a hyperdrive," he told his team, "but couldn't fix a broken door. Do Hyun taught me that understanding how things work is more important than understanding how they're supposed to work." The war between the Empire and the rebels officially ended 6 months later. The peace treaty was signed aboard the same diplomatic vessel where the final battle had been prevented. Both sides credited the Ghost Engineers' intervention with forcing them to find diplomatic solutions. Commander Yoon-ji visited the palace for the signing ceremony and insisted on meeting Do-hyun personally. "You changed everything," she told him, during their private meeting. "Not by choosing sides, but by refusing to let any side win through violence." "Violence was never going to solve the real problems," Do-hyun replied. "Those required people talking to each other, not shooting at each other." Emperor Taemin kept his promise about the reward money. The 300 million credits was donated to establish refugee assistance programs across the galaxy, helping people displaced by years of warfare return to their homes. "It's what Do-hyun suggested," the emperor announced during the ceremony. "He said the money could do more good healing the wounds of war than sitting in anyone's treasury." The Multi-Species Engineering Academy became a model copied throughout the galaxy. Species that had never cooperated before found themselves working together on projects that benefited everyone. Do-hyun often returned to the palace's maintenance levels, not because he had to, but because he enjoyed the work. He would spend hours teaching young engineers how to listen to machines, how to feel what was wrong and find simple ways to fix it. "Remember," he would tell them, "technology should serve people, not the other way around. If your solution is too complex for ordinary people to understand, then you haven't found the right solution yet." Years later, when historians wrote about the end of the Galactic War, they would debate whether Do-hyun's actions represented the triumph of human ingenuity or simply the victory of common sense over bureaucratic thinking. Do-hyun didn't care about the debates. He was too busy working on his next project, a simple device that could provide clean water to any community in the galaxy, built from components that could be found on any inhabited world. After all, the best solutions were always the simplest ones.